Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Jason is engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I am great. I am just wonderful. How about you?
I'm feeling good. I've only just woken up, though. It's just gone midnight.
Well, we'll fix that. Yeah, we'll fix that. We got 2 hours.
Yep.
So, Guineith, I was reading a story about the NRA, the National Rifle Association, that big lobbying extravaganza in Washington, D.C. And, they're fighting for us. And I was reading an article. It happened to be in the Wall Street Journal, but they shut down the article, so I can only read a couple paragraphs now. But I met this guy, the chief of the NRA. His name is Wayne LaPierre, L-A, capital P-I-E-R-R-E. So Wayne LaPierre is accused of spending $39,000 for clothes. $39,000 in clothes. I don't think I've ever spent $39,000 in 67 years. But wow. Wayne LaPierre was able to do that in one day. One day. Let me say that a different way. One day.
Wow.
Now, who in their right mind would want to give money to that organization that is that frivolous with money, that careless with money? And I don't know how you can do it. I don't know what you could buy. Would you have to buy $1,000 suits? How could you even try them on in one day? Or do you just go to a clothier and say, here's my size, that rack there over there, I'll take them all. I mean, is that what they do? I don't know.
Wow.
But that's what happened, according to the Wall Street Journal. He spent $39,000 in one day. And he also spent, he had the agency cover $13,800 for rent for a summer intern. Since when do you pay the rent for an intern? Well, if you got a lot of money in your account, I guess you can do that. He also spent $18,300 for a car and driver in Europe. I wish I could read the rest of the story. I'll see if I can find another way to read it. But the Wall Street Journal will not let me read the rest of this article unless I subscribe, and I absolutely will not subscribe. Oh, he had other expenses totaling more than, almost $500,000, just over $500,000, $542,000. That would be travel and other expenses. $542,000 in travel and other expenses. How do you do that? How does one person do that? I can't imagine. There's only 365 days in a year, and if you spend $1,000 a day on travel and other expenses, you still wouldn't reach $542,000. But he was able to do it.
Wow.
So, class, here's my word of advice. You don't have to take it. Don't give any money. Don't give any money to any organized, not-for-profit organization. I'm talking about even if it's a praise the Lord, and they certify that they're going to get you a front seat on the right side of the pearly gates, I still wouldn't contribute to that organized, not-for-profit. I'm talking about praise the Lord. Those companies, those let me say it a different way. Those corporations, you know, the churches, those are corporations. I wouldn't give them any money. If you want to help somebody, help them directly, where you know that 100% of your effort, 100% of what you want to do gets where you want it to go. Okay? You don't have to give it to someone else that will siphon off what they want to take and then give a little tiny bit to where you think it's going to go. You know, like the United Way, 11%. I remember reading the United Way, 11% of what you give went to where you thought it was going. 89% went to administrative costs. Can you imagine that? That's like the government, you know? Who could run a company like that? The only way you can do that is if you get money for free. It's the only way. Guineith,
yeah, when
any
you've
comments?
got to work for money, you learn to really, really value it.
Correct. Like us, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to come by money in my neck of the woods, and I know it is in your neck of the woods too. And we're not even on the same continent. It's still hard.
Yeah, around here, they've got a 25% unemployment rate. And I actually learnt something this afternoon as I was doing some reading on the internet. I didn't get a chance to tell you, I don't think. But Bendigo, which is the town down the road, okay, I'm talking about 80 kilometres, about 50 miles down the road, there's this town. It's got about 120,000 people living in it, and it's called Bendigo, okay? That's Ben, Bendigo. And the thing about Bendigo is a number of years ago, it was singled out. It was singled out by the United Nations for some special treatment. The United Nations decided about 2 or 3 years ago that it was going to make Bendigo and its surrounding towns the model for what towns ought to be. Now, I don't know about you, Vincent, but I treat anything that the United Nations is involved with a great deal of suspicion. And if they're going to mess with the nearest large town down the road, I would say that doesn't bode well for us.
No disagreement from me. No disagreement.
Exactly what they're going to do is not quite clear yet, but if you type in into your favorite search engine, Bendigo Model City, you'll get an AAP fact checker article coming up in the search results saying this is absolutely not the case. And I'll tell you all something about internet fact-checking services, so-called, especially ones that are associated with large media organizations such as the Associated Press. When the and Snopes and such organizations like that, when these fact-checking services say that something is absolutely not the case, you can be just about guaranteed that it absolutely is the case, Vincent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Please continue.
And that's a real worry. And like I say, I don't know that I told you that earlier. I don't think I did. But you might wonder why did they pick Bendigo? And something that I did tell you earlier is there's particular other USA prepares instructors who have had to do with Bendigo over the years. He said this in another public interview that I heard, so I guess I can say who it is, Stan Deyo. Mm-hmm. And Stan Deyo at one time in a public interview, so I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, so But he said in another public interview on another radio show that he once was offered a office at the bottom of the Central Deborah mine, which is a very, very large gold mine, almost in the middle of Bendigo, actually. You know, it's one of the only, you know, large cities in the world with a gold mine in the middle of it. And he was offered a quote-unquote office at the bottom of the Central Deborah mine, and that's 8 kilometres below the surface.
Is there a ladder? Is there a ladder to, you know, get out of the office, or is there no ladder to get out?
There's a lift, probably with a lock and a key on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, and the fellow who was going to offer him that office back in the day was Edward Teller, who had to do with the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
So given that there's that level of involvement in the gold mining industry in Bendigo, which is still a major industry there, that's the whole reason why the city's even there, is because it's a gold field. It's one of the biggest gold fields in the whole world. And the gold field actually extends all the way out to where we are. We still live in the same gold field that Bendigo is built on. And we're 50 miles away. And it's the same gold field. There's gold findings all the way from here, even out further than here. You know, even 50 kilometres further down the road, it's still the same gold field. That's an enormous gold field, Vincent. And some of the biggest nuggets in the world have been found just a few kilometres from where I live, including a nugget that is apparent. I think it's in the Caesar's Palace called, if you type into the internet quickly, Hand of Faith nugget, you'll see it. And that nugget was found within 10 kilometres of where I currently live. And, but yeah, that sort of wealth tends to draw globalists like a moth to a flame. They want their sticky fingers in it, just like they want their sticky fingers in oil fields.
That Hand of Faith nugget weighs 875 troy ounces. It's worth about $1,400,000. We'll be right back. So I just did a little bit of research on NRA spending. Unbelievable. We mentioned this earlier. So Wayne LaPierre is the CEO, and he's under siege right now, and one of the board of directors wants answers. Actually, they want to get rid of him. And I can understand this because in a single month, he spent $200,000 in air transportation in a single month, according to splinternews.com.
How do you even do that?
Yeah, well,
$300,000 in 1 month on air travel.
200,000.
200.
And 200,000. And he bought some clothes at it's impossible. I couldn't do it. I mean, if they said, I'll tell you what, we'll give you $1 million to spend $200,000 on air travel, I would fail. Right? On two occasions, from 2004 to 2017, Wayne LaPierre billed over $39,000 for purchases at a Beverly Hills clothing store. During that period, he billed a total of over $274,000 at that store.
Wow.
From 2004 to 2017. So he spent that much on clothing. I don't know how you do that. Over $250,000 on clothing. I don't think I've spent
that much on clothes in my entire life.
Well, I'm pretty sure you haven't, because I haven't. $274,000?
Oh, my gosh.
And then during a 2014 trip to Europe, he billed almost $10,000 for lodging, $17,550 for air transportation, and over $18,000 for a driver. Now, I don't know. Europe's pretty big, but is it $18,000 big to hire a driver? Yeah. So, in addition to that, according to some documents that are referred to in Splinter News, the NRA was billed over $24.3 million for outside counsel. That's outside legal counsel. $24.3 million for outside counsel. So in case you're wondering where that hard-earned money goes, class, if you go to a gun show and there are a bunch of people at a table and they say, hey, give to us, we're the NRA, we're fighting for you. Well, I guess they're fighting well-dressed and well-traveled.
Oh, my God.
I just wanted to share with our class.
Why do you need to go to Europe to campaign for gun rights in America anyway? I thought the Europeans had no gun rights. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically.
Well, yeah, that's an outstanding question.
Heard.
Yeah. Well, you know,
why
the Clintons would travel. The Clintons would travel. Barry and Michael would travel, you know, all over the world, you know, on fact-finding missions. I guess fact-finding is pretty neat. I mean, some people go fact-finding to Disney, right? They go, oh, yeah, I've never seen the mouse. I want to go look at it. And they do a fact-finding mission down to Disney. But I just want to share that it's outrageous. It's over the top. Now, I met Wayne LaPierre.
That's disgusting.
Well, I believe this is all true, and I'll tell you why I believe it. I was in Springfield, Missouri, and there was kind of a private meeting in an airport hangar. I'm very serious about this. So a private jet flew into Springfield Airport, and Wayne LaPierre got out, and he gave a little presentation. And he was with one of his buddies, a U.S. senator, and they were talking to us at this little get-together. There was maybe 20 of us in attendance. And then they got this tow motor, which is like a tractor, to pull this jet right next to the door so they wouldn't have to walk, you know, more than a few feet to get on the jet and take off and leave. So they were there for maybe 20 minutes. That's what these guys do. They jet set around. Now, I don't know. I wouldn't want that life. I wouldn't want to, you know, go from hop to hop to hop, flying around in a jet and, you know, give 20-minute presentations and then regurgitate the same thing at the next stop. I wouldn't want to do it. But, you know, it's expensive, and that's where the money's going. So the little people, the bottom 93% of which we are funding these kinds of things. We're spending money thinking that these guys are protecting us. And by the way, the NRA has 76 board of directors members, 76 people on the board for the annual meeting, annual travel, annual lodging, 76 of them. Why? And they have terms that are more than 4 years. We'll be right back. So we're talking about the NRA, and I want to make sure that we preserve our gun rights, but this is like over the top. So, for example, who are the people on the board of directors, these 76 people? How do you have a board meeting around a conference table with 76 people? How do you do that? It's pretty tough. Let me tell you some of the titles of some of the people who are on the board. I'm not going to read all their names because it'll take too long. But we've got in Alaska, as of 2018, okay, Alaska congressman is on the board. A former Florida congressman is on the board. And, of course, Tom Selleck, who's an actor. We have a member of the Indiana State Senate. We have the, an NBA star. We have, a former Idaho senator. We have a former Oklahoma congressman, a former Missouri governor, a former Idaho Secretary of State, the Idaho State Representative, and we have the former head of FEMA. Yeah, those are just some of the members of the board of directors of the National Rifle Association. Does it sound like we have business involved with government? Is that what it sounds like? Does that kind of explain why there's so much money involved?
To me.
Yeah. And does it sound similar to what I've been explaining is happening with the Laclede Electric Cooperative, how they are just making it so difficult for me to get my message across, limiting me. This morning I got an email from the Laclede Electric Cooperative attorney. They are preventing me from calling the members of the nominating committee. They will not give me the phone numbers of the people on the nominating committee. And I said, hey, I'm an owner of the corporation. I'm a member. I'm an owner. I want their phone numbers. I want to talk to them. They won't do it. The attorney recommended, he sent me an email this morning, that I opened this morning, that he recommends that they do not give their private phone numbers. Okay. So he's now saying, well, it's their private phone numbers. But they're on the corporation's committee. So it should be available to those who are running for office, who are seeking office. Nope. This is a closed system. I can't believe what I learned. I talked to the woman who is the chairperson of the nominating committee for the board of directors for this year. She's been on and off for 8 years. I said, so who owns, I asked her this question, who owns Laclede Electric Cooperative? You know what she told me? The public. The public does not own Laclede Electric Cooperative. The members own it. They're two different things. So some guy that walks into Walmart to buy flip-flops does not own Laclede Electric Cooperative unless he happens to be a rate-paying customer and a member. The general public does not own Laclede Electric Cooperative. What I'm telling you is the chairperson of the committee told me that the public owns. I had to correct her. And then I said, so what kind of criteria do you have when you select someone to be a candidate to run for the board of directors? Because they select the candidates. She told me, number one, we want to find somebody who's willing to serve. Gosh. They have to find somebody who's willing to be on the board. Then they want them to attend, most of the meetings. These meetings are from 9 a.m. to noon, once a month. And then they get free lunch from noon to 1. So while they're in the meeting, they get paid $400. $400 for half a day's work. Well, except for the chairman of the board. He gets $500, plus travel expenses, plus insurance. And you don't have to go to all the meetings, but they want you to go. And then if you express interest in learning more about what you should be knowing already, they'll send you to classes and seminars. And then I said, well, how do you think you guys have been doing with your selection? Oh, we're pretty good. I said, well, how about that gal who used to work for, who you guys nominated for the board of directors, who was a Walmart cashier? What do you think about that? Well, and I'm paraphrasing, we can't use a person's station in life. Just because she works at Walmart doesn't mean, we should eliminate her from being a candidate. I said, this is not an internship. This is not where, hey, I'd like to learn about, how electric companies work. And, hey, I've got a pulse. And I want to run the company at the highest level. This is not an internship. This is management at the highest level of the corporation. The board tells the CEOs what to do. They set policy, rates. They are the ones that guide the company into being successful or drive it out of business. So this committee is willing to overlook qualifications. We don't need no stinking qualifications. I even said to the attorney, what are the qualifications that you look for in the committee to select nominations for the board of directors? And what are the qualifications for the board? I got to tell you, these guys get up on stage and say, I'm talking about existing incumbents running for re-election. They'll stand up on the podium and I'm paraphrasing, I learned a lot. I learned a lot, about, how this works. They should have known going in how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine hiring somebody or a bunch of somebodies to be at the top of General Motors saying, listen, you don't even have to know how to drive a car or even what a car is. We're an equal opportunity selector. Anybody, we'll take anybody who wants to show up, for most of the meetings. Good enough for us. I'm not talking about race, color, or creed. I'm talking about knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
So what I believe is happening is they are getting a board together who knows nothing or very little about what they're there for. And then
so they're basically straw men that
sounds
they
like
can
it to me.
set up to be hands that they raise in the air at the appropriate time. So they'll say to these people, okay, we're going to have a vote soon, and when I say all those in favour aye, then you raise your hand. And then when I say all those who are against this motion, all those who are no, then you don't raise your hand. And then they can just say anything they want and put a whole lot of blather in with it as well. So these people are completely bamboozled because they've all got an IQ of about 90. And then when they hear that key phrase, all those in favour, aye, then they raise their hands and shout aye. And then the motion's passed. And they haven't got a clue what they've actually voted for.
Right.
I think that's how it goes down.
I do too. And
So
I wouldn't know for sure. I wouldn't know for sure because they won't let me in. I wanted to be at the nominating committee meeting, and they told me that it's not open to the membership or the public. It's closed. And then I asked the gal who was the chairman, I said, or chairwoman, or chairperson, whatever you call them nowadays. I said, so why was the membership not allowed to be in? Well, we didn't want to be distracted. They didn't want to be distracted by people.
Or they're willfully colluding.
Well, it sounds like collusion to me. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. And here's another thing. Here's what they do. She told me this, and I saw this document. Laclede Electric Cooperative has the board of directors sign an agreement that they will not individually go against what the board decides. So all those in favor of rate increases, say aye. Some of them may say aye, some of them may not. But once the vote is in and once the meeting is over, you can't go and say what a bunch of bozos the rest of the board is because they voted for a rate increase that we didn't need. You can't do that because every member of the board has signed an agreement. Not only is it the board that signed the agreement, but the nominating committee has that agreement as well. I don't know if it's written or not, but she said, we've all agreed that we will stand behind the decisions that we make. So all you have to do is have a strong leader and weak followers in these committees. And I'm convinced from being in the corporate world, and I'm not talking about Laclede Electric specifically at this point, but I've seen committees in the past, in the corporate world, where you have a bunch of know-nothing people on a committee, and the committee hides behind, or the boss hides behind the decision that the committee makes. So the boss says, boy, this is really unpopular. I don't want to make this decision. I'll get beat up for making this decision. So what we'll do is we'll have a committee, and then the boss guides the committee into making the decision that the boss wanted, because the committee doesn't know what they're doing. They don't have enough information. They're not smart enough. So they make the decision, and then the boss says, well, the committee decided that we're going to do this thing. And everybody goes, oh, man, well, hey, not me. I didn't do it. It was the committee. That's what committees are for. Committees are a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, who make a decision in a vacuum. They're led by the leader, and then they think that, hey, they're part of this great thing, this committee. They've been led to the decision. That's what a committee is. Tell me I'm wrong, Guineith.
You're not wrong. that's absolutely how these sorts of things operate, you know. And then when you get a few people start to wake up, all hell tends to break loose. Life becomes really, really uncomfortable for them because they begin to see the rorts, they begin to see the six-figure airplane bills, and they begin to say to themselves, what the heck? You know, who spends, $200,000 on jet travel in 1 month? You know?
Well, heck, the CEO, Wayne LaPierre, has made between $1 million and over $5 million in compensation in a year. Guineith Isaacs is with us. And here's something I want to share with you, class. PBS, you've heard of that. It's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Well, there's this program on PBS. It's called Arthur. And it's this cartoon program, and it's up for its 22nd season. And so this week, the show hosted a wedding between beloved teacher Mr. Ratburn and a male character named Patrick.
Oh,
they
no. Really?
A gay
wedding.
Yeah, a gay wedding. So make sure if you are going to contribute to PBS, you keep that in your thoughts, that PBS
is promoting gay marriage to little kids.
Teaching your children about
That's child
being
abuse.
Queer.
That's pedophilia.
Can you imagine? Imagine?
It's just disgusting. You know something?
Yeah.
When you begin to see this sort of thing, you're talking about the very end stages of a society, okay? And I'm saying that from what I've seen in history, okay? If you look at Pompeii and Herculaneum and the ruins thereof, they had, let's just say, some interesting garden ornaments that they've excavated from Pompeii and Herculaneum. If anybody wants to go and see what exactly their garden ornaments were, then you can look them up on the internet. They're there. But they had to do with, that they would inscribe images of personal parts on the walls and on the footpaths. And they've excavated buildings where they, how if you go into an Italian restaurant or an Italian bakery, they have the prices of buns and loaves of bread and this sort of thing inscribed on the blackboard. Okay, they would have the brothel where they would have the prices of the woman inscribed on the blackboard, and they have found this in Pompeii and in Herculaneum, and the result of that was that they ended up getting destroyed by one of the most massive volcanic eruptions that Italy has ever seen. Okay? I keep going on about this. It sets up some sort of a karmic cycle where the society either self-destructs or God sets up some sort of a destruction, a tsunami, a major hurricane, a volcanic eruption, earthquake, something like that. Either that or the society implodes in on itself through things like rampant syphilis epidemics, and it's just disgusting that they're normalizing this to little kids. I know this show, because I'm a mum, and this was a show that my children used to watch when they were little. So I know that show. And, you know, it's from now on, I think you could pretty well safely say that that show is going to collapse. That they have had their jump the shark moment, you know, where they've just gone too far. And it happened a few years ago with the Teletubbies, where they had a similar situation. And overnight, all the parents saw it, and all of them, en masse, decided that they were not going to watch the Teletubbies anymore. They were not going to have anything to do with the Teletubbies anymore. And now the Teletubbies has pretty well collapsed. I don't know if they're still producing new shows, but there's very little said about it.
Yeah, and CBS has been funded by the federal government. That's your tax dollars at work. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. And I know you're concerned about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in the United States of America. Well, don't be too concerned, because the funding level that I've found on the internet, they receive almost $500 million a year. $500 million. Well, $445 million. Can you imagine?
And they don't have to work for it.
Right. And they're an equal opportunity employer. They hire people who think that we should teach children how to be homos. It's okay. Hey, it happens in cartoons. It must be good. Teach them at an early age. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? We have lost our way. $445 million. That's $1.35 per American. $1.35 for each one of those in America. $1.35 each. Going to teach your young child how to be a homo. And you want to know what Congress is good for. That's what they're good for. Absolute outrage. Well, Guineith, what would you like to talk about? I've got a couple things, but let's go with what you want to talk about.
Okay. What I would like to do is I would like to give everybody out there in the class a heads up, and it relates to what they were talking about in the top of the hour news with regards to this conflict between Iran and Iraq. And I was reading today on the internet on msn.com.au, it's probably on msn.com as well, that the Iranian Navy has been bombarding Iraqi oil tankers in the Persian Gulf and in the Red Sea. And there's a name for that, and it's called piracy, otherwise known as privateering. When you have a license from the state, okay, it becomes privateering, but the end effect is much the same. The end effect's identical, actually. And I have a saying which I like to say to people, and I say that privateering is nothing but private piracy with a license from the Crown or from the government. Okay, so but the Iranian government has authorized its naval ships to bombard Iraqi oil tankers headed for the United States in the Persian Gulf and in the Red Sea, which is a really narrow piece of water, with cannons. You've got these big naval guns on naval ships, okay? And they, you've probably seen films of them. They've got a big swivel on them, and they can fire from many, many miles away and have an accurate hit. And the Iranian government has authorized their navy to bombard Iraqi oil tankers which are carrying Saudi oil to the United States. And if they keep that up, that could provide a real disruption to American oil supplies, because they haven't got a pipeline from Saudi Arabia that they can pump oil to, America. They have to transport it on oil tankers. And, I don't know if you've ever seen an oil tanker get hit by one of these munitions, but I'm sure it's not very pretty, Vincent.
Yeah, and there's going to be an oil slick, and it's going to kill animals in the ocean, and it's going to pollute the ocean, in a large way. Guineith, back in 1970...
it catches on fire. And it's a lot of oil to catch on fire. And what you were talking about gasoline, how much embodied energy there is in this stuff called oil. It's really, really, really calorie-dense stuff.
Yes.
And you set one of these things on fire, it's going to burn. And if they make a habit of doing this, if the Iranians make a habit of doing this, they could actually shut down oil exports from the Middle East to the United States. And that's not the only place where America gets its oil from. But something similar happened back in the 1970s, and it caused an oil crisis, which just about shut down the Australian economy and the US economy. And it just about shut down the whole show. And you're probably old enough to remember that, Vincent. I was just a little baby at the time, but I remember my dad sold his big car and bought a Mini.
Had to.
Yeah.
He had to. We're talking about, we're talking about the 1973 oil crisis. And it began in October of 1973 when OPEC, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, decided to have an embargo. And initially, the embargo was against the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Netherlands, and Japan. And it extended to Rhodesia and Portugal and South Africa. And it ended in 1974. It was, at the time, oil was $3 a barrel, and it climbed so quickly to 4 times that, $12 a barrel. And here's what happened. It was a 5% reduction, a 5% withdrawal of oil from the system to the United States. We got 5% less. We were in absolute chaos. And I was talking with a young man who worked at AutoZone. He came for a delivery here at the farm. And I asked him if he'd heard about it, and he had not heard about the Arab oil embargo of 1973. And I explained to him that you could buy about $3 worth of gasoline, depending on your license plate, whether it ended in an odd or an even number. So let's say your license, the last 3 digits of your license plates were 1, 2, 3. Well, the 3 would be the last digit, and that's an odd number. So you could buy gasoline on odd numbered days. So if you had an even number plate, you could buy gasoline on even numbered days and odd days for odd numbered plates. That's true. And if the gas station opened at, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning, normally, I'm talking about a service station where
6 a.m. lined up.
Absolutely. They were lined up in the dark around the blocks to get gasoline hours later. And they could get their $3 worth, and then the next customer $3 worth. And here's the interesting thing. Now, if you were a medical doctor, you could get as much gasoline as you needed. Or if you were a government employee, you could get as much gas as you needed. The rest of us, the bottom 93%, no. And it was horrible. People were figuring out that they had to commute to work together. They would share rides. And it was, people were working together because it's the only way you could get through this. But there was a little trick. So the independent oil gas stations, if you will, that had 2 bays, and they would do tune-ups on cars back then, points, condenser, rotor, spark plugs, air cleaner, distributor cap wires, that kind of thing. There was this thing where if you needed a tune-up, they would probably have to fill up your tank, to test drive the car and make sure everything worked fine. So for those who were willing to buy a tune-up they didn't need, they could get a tank of gasoline. And here's how it worked, because the gasoline stations would operate from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9, and they would shut down for the rest of the day. They would put those cones out in the entrance to their gas station saying, we're closed. But you'd see them working on cars. And every once in a while you'd see a car at the gas pump, when it was closed. But those are the ones that needed a full tank to test out the tune-up. And then you saw people who had these brand new Cadillacs. They bought them maybe the year before. Everything was good and gas was cheap, and it was, in the 30-cent neighborhood. So you could buy per gallon, and you could buy a lot of gas for very little money. And who cared at that time whether the Cadillac got 8 miles to the gallon or 10 miles to the gallon? Okay? If you could afford a Cadillac, gas was, of no concern. But when this oil crisis hit, you couldn't get fuel. And people were willing to trade their Cadillacs for Volkswagen Bugs. We used to call them Bugs. I don't think Volkswagen liked the term Bugs, so they call them Beetles. We used to call them Bugs, Volkswagen Bugs. And they got about 30 miles to the gallon. So people were trading their Cadillacs for used Volkswagen Bugs because they could at least get gasoline for the Volkswagen Bugs.
Yeah.
And could go farther.
Yeah.
It really happened.
But I'll tell you what, Vincent, this is true, but it's actually going to be more serious than that, and I'll tell you why. Back in the day, America actually produced a lot of its own gasoline, from its own oil fields. But that was before the peak oil crisis that we're now in the middle of, And probably, I would say that there's that the U.S. imports from the Middle East in excess of 10% of its oil requirements. That's at least more than double what it was back in the 1970s. And if the Iranians persist in bombarding so-called Iraqi oil tankers, but in reality they're American oil tankers flying under an Iraqi flag, headed for the U.S., but they carry an Iraqi flag when they go through those waters.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. We'll talk more about this when we come back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, class. And Guineith, you mentioned peak oil. So peak oil is this theoretical point at which the maximum rate of extraction of petroleum happens. Okay? The maximum amount of oil that we can pull out of the ground, that would be peak oil. Now, some people, and by the way, after the peak, the rate of extraction declines. So that means that the easiest to obtain oil has occurred before the peak. Okay? The hardest to obtain oil occurs after the peak. And so there was this thought that we hit peak oil around 1995. However, there's some people analysts, whatever they are, that believe that it will peak between 2015 and 2030, which means right now. I believe we've already, and I'm not an expert, but I believe we've already hit peak oil. I believe that the information is being hidden from us, and it's getting harder and harder to extract oil because, frankly, in 1973, oil was $3 a barrel, and now it's way, way, way higher than that.
So over $100 a barrel.
Is it in Australia?
The last I heard.
Okay. I don't have those figures in front of me. But So peak oil is really important. And everything that we know of depends on oil, whether it be gasoline for vehicles, diesel for vehicles, and after the refining process, what's left at the bottom of the kettle is used to build roads. So it's all worked out with the percentages of fine lubricating oils, motor oil, diesel engine oil, kerosene, all kinds of lubricants and fuels come from this crude oil. And what's left at the bottom is used for making roads. That'd be the tarry stuff. And so we have enough of it to make the roads. But when oil stops, what are we going to build the roads out of?
The roads stop. The cars stop. The lubrication stops. The plastic stops. Because plastics are also made of crude oil. And not only that, the pharmaceuticals stop because the pharmaceuticals are made of crude oil, believe it or not. That's actually true. And so many of the food products that we buy are actually made of crude oil, including vanilla essence. Vanilla essence is actually made of coal tar. Is actually made of tar. That's imitation vanilla essence is actually made of tar. I don't know if you knew that or not, Vincent.
Well, I know that one of my
astonishing, but it's true.
I know one of my favorite treats, if I have candy, which is not very often, I would like to have licorice, and that has coal tar dye or blue dye and coal tar dye to make it black. Licorice doesn't have to be black.
That's derived, although it says coal tar, it is actually often derived from crude oil.
Yes. And there was something that you mentioned that's very interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking about peak oil. Class, I want you to think about this. So I'll ask this question and think about it, and then I'll give you the answer. So when do you think the last refinery was built in the United States? When do you think that was? Was it 5 years ago? 3 years ago? 10 years ago? 20, 30, 40, 45? When do you think it was? 45 years ago.
I would be guessing, but I would say about 40 years ago.
You're absolutely right. You're right. So now the question...
Mind you, I'm an environmental scientist.
Yeah. So the question, Guineith, is, so why is that? Why is it that we haven't built a refinery for 45 years? Well, or almost 45 years. Well, the answer is simple. There's no need to. We're running out of oil. So why build a refinery?
Yeah. That's actually true. And if anybody wants to argue this point or doubt this, they just need to have a sit and a think and do some basic research, which is out there on the internet, of how many oil barrels you would get for each oil barrel you invested in the 1970s to how many barrels you would get for each barrel invested today, Vincent. And during the break, would you be able to do us a favor and look that up on the internet? It's easily available information.
I'll try that right now. I've seen charts that show that it's costing more and more and more barrels of oil to produce oil than it used to. So, meaning, let's say you get a 42-gallon barrel of oil for 1/10 of a barrel. So it costs you 1/10 of a barrel to get a barrel of oil. Okay. Well, over time, it has cost more and more and more. And when it gets to the point where it costs a barrel of oil to get a barrel of oil, the game's over. The game is actually over at that point. I don't have in front of me the exact numbers over time, but here's what I do know. That the current cost to refine a gallon of gasoline, this is refine it, is 60 cents a gallon. And it costs right now 49 cents a gallon to refine diesel fuel. So it costs more for gasoline than it does for diesel. 49 for diesel, 60 cents per gallon for gasoline. A barrel of oil was established in the 1800s, and that was about, well, it's 42 gallons. That's what a barrel contains. And how much of that barrel is for gas, diesel, and jet fuel and other other products? Well, 20 gallons of that 42-gallon barrel is gasoline. 12 gallons is for diesel. 4 gallons is for jet fuel. And the balance is liquid petroleum gases and asphalt and other products. So most of the barrel is turned into gasoline. But Gwyneth, you're absolutely right. It is costing us more and more energy to refine and to pump oil out of the ground than it ever has. It's costing more.
Yeah.
And I think that was your point. That was your point, yes?
That's right. When you're talking about starting to mine the oil fields of Prudhoe Bay, that's America's last resort oil field. Okay? And when you're talking about the Canadians starting to mine the Alberta tar sands for crude oil, that is their last resort oil field, where we really are getting down to last resort territory here. Okay? And you might say, oh, yeah, but there's more oil in Prudhoe Bay than the entire Middle East. Well, that may be true, but you have to take account that it's pretty hard to go drilling oil up there. For one thing, the whole place is under ice for 6 months of the year. Does anybody consider this? It's actually a lot easier, or was, until the Iranians began blockading the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, not Dead Sea, sorry, Red Sea. By bombing, cannonading oil tankers going out of the Red Sea into the Persian Gulf, heading for America. That is, and that combined with, it just happens to coincide with Donald Trump instituting tariffs on Chinese trade goods. And that in and of itself, if it's properly done, could really build American industry. But I don't know if you've noticed, Vincent, but America doesn't have any industry anymore. It doesn't have factories. Nobody knows how to make things in the U.S. anymore. You don't have factories.
I have to tell you.
If you need anything at all, you better go out and buy it now. Because, in a year or two's time, you might not be able to.
I have to tell you that that's correct. During the bottom of the hour break, I left the studio and I went into the kitchen. And our son just bought 3 hubs for a Dodge pickup that we have. It's a 3/4-ton 4-wheel drive Cummins turbo diesel. And it's a little heavier duty than the standard light duty pickup truck. We use it here on the farm. It's a 1999. He had 3 hubs because the hubs have failed at least 7 times on the front wheels. So we have to replace them again in order to use our pickup truck. That's what we're doing right now. Now, all of the hubs that he bought, all of them, and he bought them from major sources in the United States. All of the hubs are from China. We don't make bearings very much anymore. And I'm talking about everything stops. Everything stops if you don't have bearings. I'm talking about wheel bearings, axle bearings. Everything stops. Air travel, rail travel, road travel, everything stops. I have a list of nearly 6,000 products that are facing the 25% tariff. Now, some of it you don't have to worry about. You can live without eating trout and eels and ornamental fish and salmon from China. You can live without that. You can live without oysters and bird eggs, and you can live without honey, and you can live without carrots and leeks and turnips and mushrooms, garlic. By the way, China produces most of the world's supply of garlic. Well, when you get down to the important things, like gases, hydrogen, argon, nitrogen, and oxygen, it's going to be a little more difficult. And then there are other gases like chlorine. And then there are elements like iodine, fluorine, bromine, calcium, mercury. And then there are compounds like hydrogen chloride, sulfuric acid. That's in every lead acid battery, sulfuric acid. Okay. Then in industry, we use nitric acid. Then there's some other things that we want to have, but it's going to be very difficult to get without China. So what are they? Well, these are industrial products like conveyor belts, like hydraulic hoses, steam turbine parts, piston and internal combustion engines, air conditioning units, because we don't make any compressors anymore, and heat pumps. If you think you're going to be able to buy a new heat pump without the Asian sourced compressor, you're confused. Then there are metal gaskets and washers, iron and steel studs, bolts, screws, and pipe fittings. How about tools like pliers and pipe cutters and saws and even tweezers used in hospitals? How about blown glass mirrors?
Equipment.
Yes. And then, of course, let's not forget the electronics like telecommunications equipment. Everybody's got to have 7 or 8 televisions in the United States, then computer monitors and disk drives. And we don't make disk drives. They have U.S. company names on them, but we don't make them. And then what about things like locomotives? They come from China, too. Car chassis, tires, windshields, windshield wipers, headlights. Just try buying a headlight that doesn't come from China, or bicycle tires, or bicycle rims and spokes, or tractor parts. What I'm saying is we're toast. You can't buy a vacuum cleaner that doesn't come from Asia, or furniture. Even cat food comes from China. Now, a lot of things we don't need to come from China, like hair products and bath salts and soaps and hair clippers, but there are so many things that do come from China. And we are toast.
Yeah.
So, and why is that? And I'd like to just take 1 minute and say why this is. Why?
Yeah.
Well, we've had people at the head of CEO America like William Jefferson Blythe Clinton and people like Barry Soetoro who have allowed the Chicoms to export and us to import all these products which killed our manufacturing. So now we're faced with, we've had all these cheap, junky products from China. We've destroyed our infrastructure for manufacturing. And now we're trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do? So Donald Trump wants to restore America, and he's the bad guy, right? People think he's the bad guy because he wants us to build our own factories. I bought wheel bearings for a U.S. manufactured trailer. It has Dexter brand axles, top-of-the-line axles. And it's not just our trailer that has top-of-the-line axles. Dexter makes axles for lots of trailers. They're common. I took the bearings out. This is a trailer from 20 years ago. The bearings are made in China. 20 years ago.
Oh, my.
And we didn't know it. We didn't know this was happening. And then if you want to buy a set of brake shoes for a Dexter axle trailer, you're going to find out that it's difficult to buy the brake shoes. No, you have to buy the backing plate. You have to buy the electronics. You have to buy the magnet. You have to buy the springs, the whole shebang. Whereas you used to be able to buy brake shoes for $7.99. Not anymore. Now you're looking at $60, $70, $80 or more for the parts per wheel. A lot of our trailers have 4 wheels. What I'm saying is everything has gotten more complicated, and the content of Chinese parts in the products that we use is becoming greater and greater and greater. And you remove China from the equation, we are toast. I'm sorry to say it, we're toast. And you take oil out of the equation, everything stops. Everything stops. You can't get the inner plastic bag that goes in the box that contains your cereal if you choose to buy cereal. You can't get the plastic bag without oil. There is no plastic without oil. And we throw away plastic like it's free. We don't recycle it.
Yep.
We're building Mount Trashmore
that's the truth of
everywhere. Yeah.
Yep. And you know something? Around here, more or less out of necessity, I'm using basic hand tools to do a lot of my farm work. So I don't have a tractor. Well, my horse died about a month ago, so I don't even have a horse anymore, although I'm going to get another horse, at the right time. But I'm using my spade to dig holes, and my wheelbarrow to cart bulk things around the farm. And, this is how it's going to be for everyone eventually when the trade network breaks down and when crude oil goes away.
Class, the GDP is giving away extremely valuable items to these junk stores. And I'm talking about these not-for-profit, allegedly, junk stores that sell donated items to their customers. Like shovels and rakes. The GDP is giving away shovels and rakes and cast iron cookware. And shovels and rakes for $5 a piece. You can buy them at the junk stores.
Snap them up.
Absolutely,
Go
and
and
I have.
Get them.
Absolutely.
Go and get several of them, because if you're in the middle of a digging job and your shovel handle breaks, it's a real nuisance unless you have another shovel that you can bring in.
Yeah, and bring that shovel inside.
The one that's broken.
Yeah, bring the shovel inside or the rake inside if you can. That way it'll last longer. It'll be less likely to break. Revere pots and pans for $3. Guineith, you mentioned something that is absolutely positively true. So without fuel, here at our farm, our tractors, our rakes, spreaders, front-end loaders, plows, trailers, chainsaws, hay mower, hay baler, our high-pressure washer, log splitter, they're all lawn ornaments. Without fuel, they all become, in the way, lawn ornaments.
That's right. And I would like to just give you a little bit of advice. I think I've said this before. You don't have to take my advice, but I would like to advise you to, this year at calving time, pick two of the nicest, strongest, healthiest looking little bull calves that you can pick out, and castrate them and train them to take a yoke. If you can do that, you can start a bullock team, and you will be able to do a lot of those jobs around the farm using your two little bull calves who will grow up to be steers, bullocks, and they will be able to help you with a lot of that heavy farm labor. Because, hey, the cows are there anyway. You might as well use them for draft work. You might as well learn that new skill. They're going to be there anyway, Vincent.
Very, very good point. And we're back to step over. Class, you're going to have to learn that. You're going to have to learn that as people start falling by the wayside because they're not paying attention, you're going to have to step over them when they're lying on the ground and on the floor. Because refined copper, aluminum, lead, and zinc come from from China. And metal ores, including titanium, zirconium, nickel, lead, iron, China. Think about that. Kerosene, China. Natural gas, propane and butane, China. And then gold and silver, China. Platinum, China. We have a huge problem. And I think that we could be, if this continues and it escalates, we could have another 1973 gasoline and diesel fuel crisis. I think it can happen again if the escalation continues. Guineith, how would you like us to contact you since I've shut down our website?
Okay. If you need to contact me, there's two ways that you can do it. Either through my email address, which is GUIN Finelli, EITH gwyneth@gmail.com, or I have a Facebook page still, okay? And I post a lot of handy little tidbits. There's the news article from msn.com.au there at the moment, which is about the Iranian Navy bombarding Iraqi commercial shipping, especially oil tankers, and lots of useful bits and pieces like that. And if you go on to the search function on Facebook, if you have Facebook, and type in Guineith Isaacs, you will come up with my search result, and you'll know that it's me, because my wallpaper at the moment is two highwaymen, a man and a lady highwaymen at the top of the page, and my thumbnail is a masquerade mask.
Guineith, okay. We're out of time.
And the reason why, we're out of time again. Oh my gosh.
Again.
Well, you have a great week, won't you?
Won't you, too,
God bless
Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thank you for being with us. Guineith Isaacs.